The first time I held a penguin in my arms, I instantly fell in love. His name was Sandcob, and he was this tiny African penguin chick, and he was ridiculously adorable. He was all belly and big feet, and he was covered in this soft, fluffy down. And he reminded me of my first pet, a soft, fluffy bunny named Lilac. I've always been a huge animal lover, so when I first learned about endangered species as a kid, I was traumatized. And I've always felt deep down that I was meant to help those animals somehow, but I always wondered, what could I possibly do? At 31, I went back to college to become a veterinary nurse, and I met Sandcob during an internship at the New England Aquarium. He was named after a rescue center in Cape Town, South Africa, that saves African penguins, which are now an endangered species. 5 years later, I'd be at that rescue center holding a wild African penguin in my arms. Only this one would be covered with oil. In June of 2000, a ship named Treasure sank near Cape Town, and 20,000 African penguins were oiled. In the blink of an eye, these birds were in a harrowing fight for their lives. I was now penguin staff at the aquarium, and a week later, I was on a plane to Cape Town to help with the rescue. And thousands of eager but completely inexperienced local volunteers also showed up to help us. And nothing can ever really prepare you for walking into a massive warehouse filled with thousands of penguins that are coated in thick black oil and in a state of shock. Penguins are normally loud, boisterous birds, and they're constantly honking and braying and fighting each other. But these penguins were standing statue still, and they were completely silent. It was a surreal and devastating scene. And I quickly realized I'd have to shut down my emotions to get through this because it was just too painful to take in the suffering of so many animals. At the end of our first day there, 2 of us were put in charge of running a huge room with more than 4,000 penguins in it. It was the most terrifying moment of my life. I had no idea how we were even supposed to do this. This was the largest animal rescue ever attempted. And the pressure was tremendous because the future survival of an entire species was literally at stake and in our hands. What if penguins died because I screwed up? Each day, we'd have to train and supervise more than 200 volunteers in our room alone and keep our 4,000 penguins alive until it was their turn to be washed. For many birds, this could be a month-long wait. Until then, every penguin had to be force-fed every day, which could be hazardous. First, we'd have to catch a penguin, but they were in these round pens, and so with no way to corner them, we'd end up chasing each other around the pens in circles like some Keystone Cops routine. Once we finally did catch a penguin, we'd have to pry open their beak and shove several fish down their throat. But they were fighting us and ripping our flesh with their razor-sharp beaks. One of our volunteers was bitten completely through her lip by the penguin she was feeding. Our grueling days ran from dawn to midnight, and there wasn't even time to stop and eat. The stress was intense and relentless, and I didn't know we'd have PTSD afterwards. Every morning after getting home, I would wake up and think that there were thousands of oiled penguins filling my apartment and that I'd have to take care of them all by myself. Or that for months afterwards, I would struggle to find any meaning or purpose in life. Because compared to saving all those penguins, nothing seemed important. Of those 4,000 penguins in our room, there's one penguin that still haunts me to this day. One morning, a volunteer handed me this lifeless, emaciated penguin and begged me to bring it to the ICU. I instantly knew this bird was way beyond saving, and the vets would just put it to sleep. But in the chaos of running that room, it was several hours before I could finally break free long enough to bring the bird there. I could have helped end its suffering sooner if I had just asked someone else to bring it to the ICU. But in my frenzied state, that never even occurred to me. And it brought back this very painful memory from my childhood that I had completely buried. When I was 12 and my bunny Lilac was 2, she got sick, really sick. And when we brought her to the vet, it was too late to save her, and she had to be put to sleep. I was crushed and sobbed so hard I could barely breathe. But my grief was mixed with guilt because I knew her death was really my fault. You see, Lilac lived outside in a cage, and I hadn't been paying close enough attention to her. And by the time I did notice she was sick, she was almost as lifeless as that penguin. I may not have saved Lilac or that penguin, but whenever I am feeling guilty about that one bird, I have to remind myself that we did save most of the penguins in our room. And thanks to an amazing army of volunteers, 90% of those 20,000 oiled penguins were saved. It was the largest and most successful animal rescue in history. And being a part of it was the greatest privilege of my life. And on the flight back to Boston, the deeper personal significance of the rescue suddenly hit me. I had just achieved my lifelong dream of doing something tangible to help save a species. I was awestruck and deeply humbled. And my next thought was, if I die tomorrow, I'll be okay with that, because I feel as though I have just fulfilled my destiny.